always believed that the real measure of celebrity success was not just how famous he becomes, but what he does with that fame and fortune.
We were getting ready to go to South America, and everybody was packed up in the cars, ready to leave and go, and plane was about to, and I hid. And I was crying while I was hiding because I really did not want to go. I wanted to play. I did not want to go.
No, he's going to kill me. He's going to get you still worried about well, he feels that he was stripped. I'm glad he said it. Now I'll say it, yes.
Did he ever beat you? Yes, he did.
There's a sentence that haunted Michael Jackson for 50 years. It was not a lyric from a hit song, and it was not a headline from a tabloid. It was a threat whispered in the cold, quiet corners of a house in Gary, Indiana. If you ever stop singing, I will drop you like a hot potato. Those 12 words did something to the soul of a child that no amount of money or fame could ever fix. They taught him that love was not a birthright, but a transaction. They taught him that his value as a human being was entirely dependent on the sound coming out of his throat. We often look at Michael Jackson as a tragic figure of his own making, a man lost in a world of plastic surgery and eccentricities. But to understand the end, we must go back to the beginning. We must look at the last letters, the collection of notes, taped confessions, and heartbreaking interviews he left behind that reveal the architecture of his trauma. This is not a story about the king of pop. This is a story about a scared little boy named Michael, who spent his entire life running from the man he was forced to call Joseph. The terror was biological. It wasn't just a mental fear. It was a physical rejection of his reality. In his later years, Michael confessed something that shocked even the most hardened psychologists. He admitted that even as a grown man, a global icon who had met presidents and queens, the mere sight of his father walking through a door could make him physically ill. He described a visceral reaction. His stomach would turn, his hands would shake, and on several occasions, he would actually vomit. Think about the level of conditioning required to make a biological son regurgitate at the sight of his father. This was the result of a childhood lived under a regime of absolute fear. In the Jackson household, Joseph was not a dad. He was a manager, a warden, and a judge. In his courtroom was the rehearsal studio. The abuse was ritualized in a way that sounds almost medieval. In one of his most disturbing confessions, Michael described the preparation for a beating. It wasn't just a sudden lash out in anger. It was a process. Joseph would sometimes make the boys strip, and then he would have them apply oil to their bodies. To a child, this was confusing and terrifying. The oil served a dual purpose. It made the whip or the belt sting with a burning intensity that dry skin wouldn't feel, and it prevented the blows from leaving visible marks or cuts that might be seen by the public. It was calculated cruelty. It was designed to inflict maximum pain without damaging the product, because that is what Michael was to Joseph, a product, a golden goose that needed to be disciplined, but never bruised where the cameras could see. Michael wrote about the sound of the car in the driveway. It is a sound that resonates with victims of domestic trauma everywhere. The hum of the engine, the crunch of tires on gravel. For most kids, that sound means dad is home. For the Jackson children, it was the sound of an air raid siren. Michael described the scramble, the panic as he and his brothers would drop whatever they were doing and flee to their rooms, diving into bed, pretending to be asleep, or simply hiding in the closet. They would hold their breath, listening to the heavy footsteps on the wooden floor, praying they wouldn't stop at their door. This wasn't a home. It was a minefield. And Michael, being the focal point of the group, the lead singer, the prodigy, was the one who had to walk through the center of that minefield every single day. One of the most heartbreaking images from Michael's writings is the view from the studio window. While recording hits that would make the whole world dance, songs that were full of joy and rhythm, Michael was often crying. He described standing at the microphone, looking out the glass at the park across the street. He could see children playing baseball. He could see them running, shouting, falling down and getting up, just being messy, imperfect kids. And he was trapped in a soundproof booth, forced to sing the same line over and over again, until it was technically perfect. He wanted to smash the glass. He wanted to run out there and join them. But he knew that if he missed a note, or if he showed a lack of discipline, the consequences would be severe. He later said, "I didn't have a childhood. I had a work schedule." That envy of the children in the park never left him. It became the seed that would later grow into Neverland, a desperate multi-million-dollar attempt to buy back the playtime he was denied. The psychological warfare went deeper than just the beatings. It attacked his identity. Joseph had a strict rule: do not call me Dad. He insisted on being called Joseph. It seems like a small thing, but to a child, it is devastating. Dad is a word that implies safety, warmth, and unconditional protection. Joseph is a name on a contract. By stripping away the title of father, Joseph Jackson built a wall between him and his children that could never be climbed. But he didn't stop there. He attacked Michael's appearance. During puberty, when every teenager is insecure, Joseph would tease Michael relentlessly about his nose. He called him Big Nose, mocking his changing face in front of his brothers. Michael would try to cover his face with his hands, washing it in the dark so he wouldn't have to look at himself in the mirror. This cruelty is directly responsible for the tragedy that followed. Michael's obsession with plastic surgery, the endless alterations to his nose and face, were not just vanity. They were an attempt to carve away the face that his father had mocked. He was trying to erase the boy Joseph called ugly. To survive this nightmare, Michael and his sister Janet developed a coping mechanism that is as tragic as it is chilling. They played a game. In the quiet moments when the house was still, they would sit together and imagine a world where Joseph was gone. They would fantasize about his funeral. It sounds morbid, but for two powerless children, imagining their oppressor dead was the only way to feel a flicker of freedom. They weren't wishing for death out of malice. They were wishing for peace. Janet would tell him to close his eyes and picture a life where they didn't have to be afraid. And then they would open their eyes and the reality would come crashing back down. The heavy footsteps, the shouting, the belt. It was a bond forged in the trenches of a war zone, a secret language of survival between brother and sister. The exploitation of Michael's youth wasn't just about rehearsals. It was about the environment he was forced into. While other kids were sleeping with teddy bears, Michael was performing in nightclubs at 3 a.m. These were not family-friendly venues. These were strip clubs and adult bars, filled with smoke, alcohol, and desperate characters. Michael recalled seeing things no child should see: strippers, fights, the dark underbelly of adult life, all while he was still in elementary school. He would perform his set, smiling and dancing, and then retreat backstage to do his homework or try to sleep on a pile of coats while the bass of the club shook the floor. He was a child soldier in the music industry, exposed to the rawest elements of the world before he was even old enough to understand them. This exposure shattered his concept of normalcy. He grew up believing that the world was a place of performance and vice, where purity was something you had to fight to keep. And yet, the most complex part of Michael's final confessions is the paradox of forgiveness. In his later years, specifically in the tapes recorded with Rabbi Shmuley, Michael vacillated between intense hatred and a strange, broken form of gratitude. He called Joseph a genius. He admitted that without the whip, without the fear, he might not have become the Michael Jackson the world worshipped. He acknowledged that Joseph's toughness made him strong, made him a perfectionist who could command a stadium of 100,000 people. This is the tragedy of the abused child who becomes successful. They are forced to wonder, did the abuse make me great? Michael struggled with this until his dying day. He wanted to hate the man, but he also saw the man's drive in his own reflection. He wrote about trying to forgive Joseph, not for Joseph's sake, but to cleanse his own soul of the poison. "I don't want to carry this anger," he said. "It's too heavy." This desire to break the cycle became the defining mission of his life as a father. When Michael had his own children, Prince, Paris, and Blanket, he swung the pendulum to the absolute opposite extreme. He smothered them with affection. He told them he loved them 100 times a day. He vowed in writing and in practice that he would never, ever raise a hand to them. He wanted to be everything Joseph was not. If Joseph was the cold iron, Michael wanted to be the soft velvet. He created a world for them that was almost too protected, too magical, because he was terrified that a single drop of the reality he experienced would contaminate them. When you see footage of Michael with his kids, you aren't just seeing a doting father. You're seeing a man actively fighting a war against his own past. Every hug was an act of rebellion against Joseph. The hot potato threat never really left him, though. Even at the height of his fame, Michael lived with a deep, internalized terror of being abandoned. He felt that if he stopped entertaining, if he stopped being the biggest star in the world, people would stop loving him. Because that was the lesson of the kitchen table in Gary, Indiana. Love is conditional. Love is something you earn with a spin and a high note. This is why he pushed himself to the brink of exhaustion, why he couldn't sleep, why he needed sedatives to quiet the mind that was still waiting for the other shoe to drop. The world saw a superstar. Michael felt like a precarious commodity, always one false move away from being discarded. In the end, the letters and tapes reveal a man who was suspended in a state of arrested development, not because he didn't want to grow up, but because he was waiting for someone to come and save the child he left behind. The tragedy of Michael Jackson is not that he died young. It is that he was never allowed to live young. He was an old soul in a child's body, and then a child in a man's body, forever out of sync with time. As we close the book on these painful revelations, we are left with a different image of the king of pop. We don't see the sequins or the moonwalk. We see a little boy standing in the wings of a dusty theater, trembling, checking the oil on his skin, waiting for the signal to go out and smile for the crowd. He gave us his voice, his dance, and his magic. But the price he paid was hidden in the shadows of his father's silhouette. Joseph Jackson created a legend, but he destroyed a son. And in his final words, Michael made sure the world knew that the crown he wore was heavy, sharp, and stained with the tears of a childhood that never stood a chance. The story of Michael and Joseph is a cautionary tale for the ages. It asks us a difficult question. Is greatness worth the destruction of a human spirit? Michael's answer, found in the spaces between his words, seems to be a quiet, heartbreaking no. He would have traded the kingdom, the throne, and the applause just to be that kid in the park, missing the ball, skinning his knee, and having a dad who would pick him up and say, "It's okay, son, I love you anyway." That was the one award Michael Jackson never won.